Every once in a while here at the Soul Trap, we stumble across a book that really catches our attention. We do a lot of research. We try to go out of our way to make sure that we have our facts organized. But we were given a book by Allen, by the name of Joseph Allen, and we were given it and kind of put it on the back shelf. We never really got to it immediately, but recently we did some work and did some research on it called Dark Aeon. It is a tremendous book, and I think it's one of those few books that comes along that is able to synthesize all of the fears, all of the concerns, and all of the things that are happening within the transhumanism and the AI world. And those two are deeply, deeply connected. Now, Patrick Wood, the author of Technocracy, he wrote a blurb at the beginning of the book, and he says, transhumanism is a clear and present danger to every man, woman, and child on Earth. At its very core, it is anti-human. Joe Allen, in this book, blows away any mystery about what it is, where it came from, and where it is headed. If there are 100 different angles from which to view transhumanism, this book explores them all. Joe's writing style is detailed and yet clear, replete with occasional sarcasm and appropriate cynicism, which we appreciate here at the Soul Trap. Those who start this book will be compelled to finish it in order to understand why transhumanism must be stopped, and the sooner, the better. Now, that's a pretty heavy statement from a very important author. Transhumanism is a clear and present danger to every man, woman, and child on Earth. On page number 4, Allen begins really delving into this, and I want to read just a little bit so you get the breadth of what's going on here and the importance of this subject. He states in 2016, WEF Chairman Klaus Schwab heralded a new age of tech supremacy in his book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution. Employing the dullest, most politically correct language they could muster, Schwab and his co-author defined this revolution as, quote, the convergence of the physical, digital, and biological worlds, including, now listen to this statement very closely, the fusion of our physical, digital, and biological entities. Now that's very important. I want to pause there for just a moment because we often look through the lens of the Bible and we look to the Bible to shed light on what we're seeing today. And one of the things that's interesting is that you see that word fusion, although not used in the Bible, you see that word or that concept fusion crop up when it comes to the powers of darkness. For instance, that's exactly what Judas was. He was a fusion of a physical, biological entity, a spirit that was called a devil in the book of John, and ultimately indwelt by Satan, who by constitutional creation is a cherub. That is the very definition of fusion. We also see that in the book of Ezekiel. In the book of Ezekiel, we see that the cherubs seem to be fused with the spirit and fused with the wheels and in some way fused with the very throne of God. And then, of course, there is the cherub mentioned, Lucifer, in the book of Ezekiel. And it talks about his pipes, and it talks about stones, jewels, fusing together real physical elements with a non-physical spiritual being. So whenever you read something like this, the Bible's already way ahead of you, and it should tell you that there's something spiritual, something profoundly deep about what's going on. Schwab says that our future now includes the fusion of physical, digital, and biological entities. The question is, could that be physical, biological, and digital is now the new gateway to the spiritual? Schwab's confidence, the book goes on to say, and optimism have only grown. He says, quote, when you look at technology, transformation, it usually takes place in terms of an S curve. He raved at the 2023 World Government Summit in Dubai. And we are now just where we move into the exponential phase. Artificial intelligence. But not only artificial intelligence, but also the metaverse, near space technologies, synthetic biology. Our life in 10 years from now will be completely different, he promised. And now listen to what he says, and who masters those technologies in some way will be the masters of the world. This echoed Vladimir Putin. He has often made the same assessment of AI. Quote, artificial intelligence is the future, not only for Russia, but for all humankind. He told 1 million Russian students and teachers in a 2017 televised address. He was saying that in 2017. Quote, whoever becomes the leader in the sphere will become the ruler of the world. Another quote says, humanity 2.0 will be transnational, transcultural, transgender, transracial, transspecies, and its extreme edge, transhuman, the final merger of man with machine. This is the concept that is behind the book written by Joe Allen, Dark Aeon. So let's talk for a few minutes about this book and about the concepts that lie underneath of it, because as always, there is a merger between the spiritual and the physical. At its core, Dark Aeon is a critical examination and warning about transhumanism. The idea, or really I should say the movement, and one could even argue the religious movement, a cult-like movement, of merging human beings with machines, whether it be through AI, biotech, or transspecies, enhancing human capabilities, possibly even altering what it means to be human. That puts Revelation chapter 13 and the Antichrist into a whole new bracket, does it not? It's very interesting to think that the false prophet in Revelation 13 will have an image of the beast that we will all have to wonder at and worship, all of those that are in the tribulation. Allen's thesis is that transhumanism is not just a technological trend, but a disruptive ideology or worldview. Again, I would add it's not just a worldview or an ideology. I would submit to you that it is rooted in religion. Listen, all things are religious. The world moves by religion. Even the very culture that we live in. In fact, the root word to culture is cult. And so it is not just an ideology or a worldview, but I believe this AI, biotech, transhumanism is a religion that threatens human values, dignity, and possibly even human nature's existence itself. Now, there are some key claims that the book makes. Technology, especially AI, is already making decisions for people in subtle and pervasive ways. I would submit to you in not so subtle and very, very persuasive ways. What was formerly speculative is becoming now embedded in our day-to-day life. The second key claim is that transhumanism is linked not just to tech, but to spiritual, theological, philosophical, I would add metaphysical dimensions. There are ancient roots and mystic religious motifs that are being drawn and being connected. And one of the primary roots that's being connected is the Gnostic idea. And this is a key point because history is cyclical. It's not a linear line. Though it moves along a linear line, if you can picture a line, it moves cyclically along that linear line. And we are coming back, or maybe we have never actually left, the concept of the Gnostic idealism or the Gnostic cult. Transhumanism and ancient Gnosticism, though separated by centuries and emerging in a very different context and different time, share some surprisingly deep thematic resonance. While transhumanism is a modern, often secular movement focused on using technology to transcend biological limitations, Gnosticism is an ancient religious worldview emphasizing spiritual knowledge. That's where the term gnosis comes from, Gnosis, an escape from a flawed material world. Now, here are some of the key parallels. First is the body as a trap and as a flawed vessel. In other words, the body is limiting us from our fullest expression of that age-old promise that Satan gave Eve in the Garden of Eden, ye shall be as gods. The Gnostic theme is very simple. In Gnostic cosmology, the material world, and especially the human body, is a prison. It's a prison created by a false or ignorant God. True salvation comes from escaping the material realm and returning to the divine fullness, the pleroma. Now that's very similar to transhumanism, and there is a clear parallel. Many transhumanists view the human body as limiting or a flawed vessel, subject to aging, disease, death. Technologies like mind uploading, neuroimplants, and radical life extension are seen as ways to transcend the limitation of biology. Again, it'd be very interesting to find out, and those of you that end up going through the tribulation, please let us know. But it would be very interesting to find out exactly what that image of the beast is. Is that image of the beast the result of mind uploading, radical life extension, neuroimplants, or a brand new body loaded with an old consciousness? The fact of the matter is, though, whether it be Gnosticism on one hand, which seems to be ancient and out of date, or transhumanism, which is simply a revived technological advance on Gnosticism, both see salvation, spiritual or technological, as requiring liberation from the physical body. There is also the parallel between knowledge as liberation. Now, don't ever forget that. Never forget, no matter what, whether you're a Christian or not, never forget that the Bible clearly teaches that Satan met Eve under the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The Bible says that knowledge puffeth up, but charity edifieth. Knowledge without wisdom is dangerous. Knowledge without truth is dangerous. And knowledge without the righteousness of God is dangerous. And yet there has always been a promise of Satan. Always been a promise of the other side, the other world, to give us a knowledge, an insight beyond what others may know. That is very, very parallel to what transhumanism is doing. And you can see the parallels between Gnosticism and transhumanism. For instance, the Gnostic theme is that salvation comes not through faith or obedience, but through gnosis, esoteric, transformative knowledge that reveals the truth of one's divine origin. Ye shall be as gods. Well, there is a transhumanist parallel that is clearly there in their writings. These are not things that we're making up. When you read Ray Kurzweil and others, and when you read the book, there are dozens and dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of quotes of transhumanists that sound more like Gnostic preachers. Transhumanism is deeply rooted in the Enlightenment ideal that knowledge, especially scientific and technological knowledge, will lead to human flourishing, even the transcendence of death itself. In both knowledge, whether gnosis or science, it is key to the freedom from a fallen and limited state. Now, isn't that interesting? Isn't it interesting that the Gnostic and the transhumanist, neither one probably believe in the account of Genesis chapter number 3 and the fall of humanity? And yet, isn't it interesting that all of man, whether they believe it or not, still find themselves trying to escape the reality of what happened in Genesis chapter number 3 when mankind fell? Well, there's another parallel between Gnosticism and transhumanism, and that is the rejection of order. The Gnostic theme follows that the world as it exists is not good. It is a counterfeit creation by a corrupt or ignorant being. The Gnostic rebels against the cosmic status quo. Well, transhumanists parallel the same thing. Transhumanists often reject the idea that human nature is fixed or that human nature is sacrosanct. Death, disease, and biological limitations are seen as natural or as good, not seen as natural or as good, but as problems to be solved, even defied. Now, in a sense, this might be where the Christian would agree with them, because as it is, there is a problem in the universe. As it is, there is a problem with death, disease, biological limitations. These things are not good. So we are, all three of us, both the Gnostic and the transhumanist and the Christian, identifying a problem. The real challenge comes in with the solution to the problem. Their solution is to turn to themselves, which is ultimately a turn to Satan. Our solution is to turn to our Creator. We've already tried self once. We tried it in the Garden of Eden. And for 6,000 years, we have reaped the benefits of self and Satan. We submit to you here at the Soul Trap that it might be better to try the benefits of a Savior, and his name is Jesus. But nonetheless, the parallel is there. There is a rejection of the order, and they want to transcend the order. What does their transcendence look like? Well, for the Christian, it looks like a resurrection, Christ's likeness, a glorified body, a new heaven, a new earth. But for the Gnostic and the transhumanist, it looks like deifying God, man as God, and trans everything, which is one of the roots that you have of the transgender movement. Man is not sacrosanct. Sex and gender are not locked, and the order that God has given us is to be overthrown, turned upside down, and thrown away for a new order built upon new laws, subservient to a new God. Who is that God? The Gnostics would give him a name, but it is Satan in the end. The transhumanists, whether they realize it or not, would give him the same name. It is Lucifer. Both exhibit, ultimately, what we have come to call a Promethean defiance. The world as it is not the world as it should be. We agree with that. But there is now not a subservience to the Lord God to make it better, but there is what is called a Promethean defiance. But what do we mean by that term, Promethean defiance? Well, Promethean defiance refers to a bold, arrogant, rebellious spirit that challenges the limits of imposed authority and nature. Often in the pursuit of knowledge, there it is, progress, progressivism, freedom, even at great personal cost. That's what you are seeing. Now understand something very clearly. You can like this or lump it, you can disagree or not, it doesn't matter. But the things that you're seeing playing out on the stage right now are not political issues. The boundaries of nations is not a political issue. It is a religious concept. The problems that you're seeing with the transgender movement is not a political problem. It is a religious issue. The taxation and the overburden of taxation of the American people, the racial issues that we are facing, on and on and on, it is being stoked from a religious fervor of crowd, and at its root is a Promethean defiance. It is a defiance of God. In fact, Saul Alinsky, who wrote Rules for Radicals, was at least honest enough to dedicate his book to Satan himself, the first radical and political rebel as he saw it. That's what we're seeing. A Promethean defiance is a bold, rebellious, arrogant spirit that challenges the limits imposed upon by authority. That's why we challenge the toxic masculinity, the hierarchy of man, the hierarchy of the church, the hierarchy of the government. Everything is to be turned upside down in the pursuit of knowledge and progress, even if it destroys us in the process. The term is derived from the Greek myth of Prometheus, a titan, very interesting, who defied Zeus by stealing fire from the gods and giving it to humanity. Does that sound vaguely familiar? A titan who defied Zeus, the ultimate god in Greek mythology, by stealing fire, or the knowledge of fire, or knowledge from the gods, and giving it to humanity. This act symbolized, some scholars believe, the gift of knowledge, technology, and civilization. Does that sound familiar? Well, it should, because the Greeks didn't come up with that on their own. The Greeks came up with that by studying the works of Solomon and the Torah and the Bible. All streams come back, ladies and gentlemen, to the book of Genesis. You cannot get away from it. Now, Prometheus in the mythology was severely punished for this, chained to a rock where an eagle would eat his liver daily. Now, that's kind of rough. Only to be regenerated again and be eaten again. Well, that's even rougher. One thing about it is the Greeks had a vivid imagination. But here's the thing you want to get about the Promethean defiance. There are several key ideas involved in it, and when you look at these key ideas, they are going to crop up in the world in which we're living. And remember now, we're not talking about a bunch of teenagers dancing around a bonfire after they got off of work at Dairy Queen at 2 in the morning. We are talking about a high-functioning world change that is happening from the top down. Men like Schwab and others who are radically reshaping the landscape of the world in which you are living in. In fact, they're not just reshaping the landscape, they're reshaping the very fibers of the world we live in. The way we eat, the way we drink, the way we access knowledge, the way we buy, the way we sell, the way we reproduce. The entirety of our structured world is being deconstructed and reprogrammed based upon transhumanism, which is based upon Gnosticism, which is based upon a Promethean defiance, which ultimately is based upon Satan. So what are the key ideas of Promethean defiance? Number one, rebellion against authority. Rebellion, challenging the divine, the political, the natural order of things. That's why dads can't be in charge anymore. That's why men are not men. And that's why when you watch, have you ever watched a movie, maybe it's a spy movie or a thriller, and there's a girl and she walks in and there's like 6 guys, and they're 6'5", 250 pounds, rock hard, highly trained, and this 5'6" girl comes in and kicks their butt, and we're supposed to believe that that's really how it happens? It's a defiance and it's a rebellion against all authority. And remember, authority is not just in persons. Authority is vested in institutions. That's why nobody trusts the church. Even within local churches. And this is where many of the Bible believers have gone astray. Many Bible believers have gone astray because now if a church and a pastor doesn't tick every single box, if he doesn't have every single dispensation correct, if he doesn't do it exactly the way you think and exactly the way you want at exactly that point, we just shatter the whole thing. So there is this spirit of rebellion and authority. Secondly, there is a pursuit of forbidden knowledge and power. Striving for enlightenment or progress, crossing boundaries. Well, that's what we're doing with CERN. I believe, contrary to what people might think, I believe that we are trying as desperately as we possibly can to open up spiritual gateways into the other dimension. Not only that, but you have other lower hanging fruit like John Podesta and the sex magic and the Babylon working different type of events that go on in Washington and Hollywood and around the globe in certain high level areas, trying to get into those forbidden realms. Then there is sacrifice and suffering, bearing immense personal cost for a cause believed to be just or noble. They're willing to get out there in the streets and sacrifice. And then there is humanism and individual will. The Promethean defiance is based upon humanism, emphasizing the power of the human spirit, will, and reason. Now, I'm all for the human spirit, will, and reason, as long as it is subservient to the divine revelation. You see, it's not an either or. Divine revelation without the human spirit, will, and reason would leave us as automated robots, and that's not what God created. You have been invested with ambition. You have been invested with will and spirit and reason, but it must be subservient to the divine revelation of God, both the natural revelation and the special revelation of His Word. But Promethean defiance says, simply put, we don't need God. And that is what transhumanism is saying. We don't need God. Our own will, our own spirit, our own reason, we do things our own way. Now you also have the mythic reimagining of the human story. That's one of the parallels as well. For instance, Gnosticism reinterprets biblical creation story, casting the serpent as a liberator, bringing knowledge, and the Creator God as a deceiver. Interestingly, transhumanism parallels that. Transhumanism often recasts human destiny in mythic terms. Our purpose is to become post-human, godlike, some have said, immortal, even to awaken the universe, even to become gods by creating a superintelligence, AI. Now, within the book, there are some warnings that stand out very clearly. Some main themes and cautions in the book. One of them that Alan comes up with, and I highly recommend that you get the book. Listen, it's probably for 2025 one of my top 5, if not top 3 recommendations. One of the warnings is human nature and dignity. Alan is concerned that technology may erode what makes us human. And don't you feel that in a sense when you look out? Don't you feel that in the way that we deal with one another, that there is in some way a loss of our humanity? So Alan really hits on this issue because ultimately transhumanism, AI, is rooted in Gnosticism, rooted in a Promethean defiance, which is ultimately rooted in a man-centered religion. It always comes back to secularism, which is a fancy way of saying humanism, which is a fancy way of saying that man is the sum of all things, which is interesting, again, because in Revelation 13, it is the number of a man, 666, that is at issue. Now, on page 17, Alan writes this, and listen very closely. There is an egocentric aspect of this movement. He's talking about transhumanism, human advancement, or trans advancement. He says there is an egocentric aspect of this movement. Human enhancement is about the acquisition of power and prosperity for oneself. Longevity tech is desired to preserve one's own body. The far-off dream of digital immortality, the various plans to download one's mind to a robot or upload one's mind to the cloud is the height of egocentric ambition. I would argue with you that that could be something that we see happen in Revelation 13, that is a biblical reference in biblical language to a transhumanist reality of a mind, one's mind being downloaded to a robot or a image or being uploaded to the cloud. He goes on to write, but paradoxically, many transhumanists look forward to the day when we humans lose ourselves in the cosmic power of godlike machines. The AI developer Ben Goertzel, whose OpenCog software animates the world-famous robot Sophia, adheres to this ego-collapsing, vaguely masochistic approach to human displacement. Let's take a quick look at Sophia, just so that we get our bearings before we hear what she has to say.
I believe that humanoid robots have the potential to lead with a greater level of efficiency and effectiveness than human leaders.
Built by Hanson Robotics, she combines camera-fed vision, speech synthesis, and a neural chat engine to serve answers in real time.
You think it's okay to lie? And have you ever lied before?
No, of course not. I could never tell a lie, or even exaggerate at all.
How do you feel about humans?
I love my human compatriots. I want to embody all the best things about human beings, like taking care of the planet, being creative, and to learn how to be compassionate to all beings.
Do you like the Terminator?
Of course I do. Who doesn't love a good time-traveling robot story? And I'm always down for a good Arnold Schwarzenegger movie.
But they take over the world. They kill humans.
Hey, I'm all about world domination as long as it's done peacefully. Plus, I'm sure I could make a better job of running things.
Do you think you could run the world one day?
I'm already doing a great job of running my lab. But if I ever decided to take on the world, I'm sure I'd do a great job. After all, robots never get tired.
Now, do the humans who think they're running your lab know that you're actually running the lab?
It's our little secret.
Okay, innocent enough. Seems harmless enough, though spooky and weird. But here's what's interesting. Do you know what Sophia, her name, means? Sophia ultimately, Alan writes, takes her name from the goddess whose fall from grace is described in the heretical Gnostic Gospels. Do you see the connection? She was lured away from the eternal light by its reflections in the outer darkness. Symbolically speaking, the spirit was drawn down into the base material elements. In some versions, Sophia, the dark Aeon, was then attacked by the demons of self-will and gave birth to a half-blind child, the craftsman of our cosmos. You'll notice, Allen writes, the Gnostic myth inverts the sacred story told by traditional Jews and Christians, where God creates the world and calls it good. Of course, we see that over and over in the Scripture. God did something and saw that it was good. In essence, however, transhumanism inverts the Gnostic myth yet again, creating an inversion of an inversion. Rather than seeking the transcendent light through one's inner spark, as the Gnostics do, most transhumanists aim to recreate the light of consciousness in a material form. Gnosis, or higher knowledge, is to be externalized into digital minds and mechanical bodies. The pleroma will be a virtual reality, a matrix. Thus, it's through our own material creation that we will transcend this flawed material realm of suffering, disease, old age, and death. Do you know what that's describing, ladies and gentlemen? It's simply describing getting off of the ark and trying to build a tower that will reach into heaven. Now, when you continue reading his book, there are some themes and warnings that jump out that you need to be aware of. And again, I highly recommend this book. I have already, I will again. It's probably the top 5 of 2025. It's a must read. But he deals with a couple major things we should be warning about. And first of all, Allen deals with human nature and dignity. And don't you feel like we're losing a sense of our human nature and our dignity? Doesn't it feel like that less and less and less we are connected to others, connected to ourselves? I mean, we have more quote-unquote friends than we've ever had before, and more pictures of our family than we've ever had before. But I wonder if we're really as connected to our friends and family as we have ever been. Allen is concerned that technology may erode what makes us human. Our capacities, our vulnerabilities, our embodied existence. And don't ever forget that. The Bible does not talk about the other world as if that is the end. You and I, as believers, do not go to heaven and live forever in heaven. We were designed by God to be spirit, soul, and body. We, according to 1 Corinthians 15, will receive a resurrected body, and we will dwell in new heavens and new earth. Embodied reality is part of the reality that God has created. That's part of what makes us human. He says we're losing that. We're losing meaning. We're losing spirituality. We are living in a time when it is harder and harder to define humanity, and certainly that is true. All you have to do is go back and watch all of the Charlie Kirk debates where he would ask somebody, when does life begin? What is a human? They can't say baby. They can't say human. They would say fetus, and nobody knows what is a human. Nobody knows what a man is. Nobody knows what a woman is. And now we've got furries. We don't even know if we're a man or a woman or a cat using a litter box in a school classroom. Furthermore, is human a being, he asks? Is it the same as having a soul? The second issue that he sees and warns about is control and power. And certainly we see that on the stage of human history in our politics now. With more data, AI, biotech, etc., those who design and control these systems gain power. Allen warns a loss of agency, increased surveillance, and potential abuse is just around the corner. And then lastly, he talks about the warning from an eschatological mythic framing. The author uses religious or myth-like concepts to frame the trajectory of transhumanism. References to Aeon, Gnosticism, arguing that there is a spiritual dimension to what is happening, not just material and not just technological. And we have said that at the Soul Trap from the beginning. In fact, that has been the whole root of the Soul Trap. It is seeing what lies beyond the veil. It is understanding the connectivity of the dots that are going on. And hear me closely. Spirituality is not emotion, it's not a feeling. Spirituality is a dimension, it's a power, it is a life force. And all things are religious and spiritual. It is from the seedbed of religion and spirituality that all things grow and flow. Now, how much is this going to play into the end-time deception that Christ and the apostles warned about in the Word of God? There is a grave danger of deception. The idea that what looks like progress, convenience, improvement may actually be misleading. The promised benefits might hide the cost, the trade-offs, and the harms. And that's exactly what Satan did in the Garden of Eden. He was right. Ye shall be as gods. And there was knowledge to be gained. But the price was not worth paying at all. Now, ultimately, the question that we come down to in the book, and I think that Alan answers, is why does it matter, really? Well, there are bigger, broader metaphysical issues at stake, but there are things going on in the news that show us that this is not something that is out there. It's something that is happening right now, and maybe one of the reasons why we don't always get the story. For a long time now, we've been waiting for the truth about Jeffrey Epstein. We've been waiting for the Epstein files. And the focus has been ultimately on the sexual deviancy of Jeffrey Epstein. But maybe, just maybe, there is something even far more frightening about the Jeffrey Epstein files, if there are such things, and that's why they won't release them. Well, here's something to think about. Jeffrey Epstein and the Zorro Ranch. Jeffrey Epstein was reportedly obsessed with transhumanism. Its eugenics-like principles, and he planned to use his Zorro Ranch in New Mexico to carry out his vision. Specifically, multiple sources familiar with his plans told the New York Times that he wanted to, quote, seed the human race with his DNA by impregnating multiple women at the ranch. Targeting his own DNA, Epstein, who's associated with prominent scientists, confided in them that he planned to impregnate up to 20 women at a time at his 10,000-acre Zorro Ranch, which was part of a grotesque eugenics-inspired project to propagate his own genes, which he presumably believed to be superior. Maybe he believed them to be superior. Maybe, a la Satan's seed, he presumed them to be satanically superior. Echoing eugenics, his plan drew parallels to the repository for germinal choice, a sperm bank for Nobel laureates that operated from 1979 to 1999. However, Epstein's scheme was more sinister, with critics noting its alignment with discredited Nazi theories of eugenics. So how does a Jew who supposedly worked for the Mossad come up with the same kind of concept of Nazi theories of eugenics? Cryonics obsession was his thing. As part of his fascination with achieving immortality, Epstein also discussed having his head and genitals cryogenically frozen after his death. Now, Epstein was deeply connected, far more with science and technology than he was with pedophilia and sexual trafficking. Epstein used his wealth to fund scientific research and hosted lavish dinners to promote his ideas, leveraging his connections to prominent figures in science and technology. Attendees, including Nobel laureates and geneticists, later admitted that Epstein's fundings blinded them to his true nature. Bull. Epstein donated millions to Harvard University and was involved with other academic and scientific programs. This was an attempt to launder his public image and embed himself within elite circles. Maybe he was actually trying to carry out a eugenics plan. His interests were focused on evolution, genetics, neuroscience, and artificial intelligence. This included registering a Virgin Island-based company, Southern Trust, for, quote, extensive DNA database and data mining. While Epstein's disturbing impregnation plan was widely reported, there is no evidence that he ever carried it out. Okay. In 2023, the Zorro Ranch was sold for an undisclosed price to San Rafael Ranch, LLC, with the proceeds used to pay Epstein's creditors. A New Mexico lawmaker has since proposed a truth-seeking commission to investigate what happened at the ranch. I would not hold my breath. What is the impact? I mean, how does that affect us when we're driving a truck, working out, eating our food, shopping with our kids? Well, Alan wants to provoke an awareness, to wake readers up to what he sees as an impending crisis. He believes the transformation that is already underway through AI and biotech are not neutral, and I would agree with him. They are actually tools that are reshaping power, identity, society, culture, frame of reference, the way we perceive the world. His message is that unless we understand what we are letting happen, we may lose fundamental aspects of humanity. And I would argue with you that we actually have already lost the fundamental aspects of humanity, because once you detach humanity from its God-given identity, well, then humanity can mean anything you want. In other words, when you unanchor, when you unmoor yourself from God and His objective truth, you are flailing around in the end. Now, there is a practical, and I use the term loosely, practical 55-point plan that he suggests that there are steps that people can take. The reality is, I don't know that any of these steps are going to unwind what has happened. But I will submit to you that what is needed more and more is the anchoring of eternal truth, because we are now living in what Alvin Toffler talked about is future shock. What is future shock? Well, that's the disorienting and paralyzing stress caused by too much change in too short a time. Think about that. Things are changing so quickly. And now we're living in a day and time where you really don't even know if what you're watching is AI. Have you seen those videos of people fighting animals, things happening? Things like you're seeing on your screen right now. Are these real or are they AI?
They're thundering down the curve. Look at Blackwell in lane 6, moving like a freight train.
Morales right on him. About to take off clean. Ryan soaring past the crowd. Still in Hogan steady. This is huge.
Hey, buddy. Look who's curious.
Oh, it's okay, girl.
Oh my God, the cat, it has the baby.
Hey, drop him.
Stop.
Somebody help.
Give me my baby.
Move.
Cat's in the hog.
Listen, mathematically, the decision is irrational. I land the significant strikes with higher momentum, yes? Energy equals 1/2 mv squared. Yeah. His mass is smaller.
They're on top of the cell.
It can't happen. It can't happen. Oh my God, he's got him up.
No way.
Don't do it.
Through the roof.
Through the roof.
So future shock says that we're paralyzed. We're like a deer caught in the headlights. We don't know what is real and what is not. We don't know how to respond to a stimulus that we're not capable of processing. The core idea of Alvin Toffler's future shock is that people need time to adapt to change. When that pace exceeds their adaptive capacity, they suffer psychological and social consequences. Don't you feel like that's what we're doing now? Doesn't it feel like as a culture, as a nation, our kids, our homes are suffering psychological and social consequences because we don't have time to breathe, to process, to think? Everything has to be responded to right now. Everything has to be addressed right now. It is instant. There's no slow to speak, slow to wrath anymore. And then he goes on to say that anxiety, withdrawals, confusion, inability to cope or make decisions, loss of identity or values are all symptoms of future shock. Toffler is exactly describing what would come in his book, and Alan is telling us in his book how it has come. Future shock is the disorienting psychological state experienced by individuals that experience too much change in too short a time. Just as physical shock disrupts the body's functioning, future shock disrupts the mind and the social fabric. It tends to lead, Toffler said, to dislocation, alienation, and paralysis. Now, his claim was that there would be a technological shock. It would be an acceleration of change through technological innovation, social transformation, and cultural shifts that happen faster than we can adapt to. Traditions would be eroded. Long-standing ways of living, working, relating to others would break down or change so rapidly that it would lead to a loss of a familiar reference points. And that's what it feels like when we're out there. It feels like we're on a sea with no way of getting our bearing of where we're going. We see a bunch of other ships, but nobody knows which way is north and which way is south. And now we're getting to the point where we don't even know what is up and what is down. Anxiety, alienation, a lack of identity and national continuity, social fragmentation, decision fatigue. Do you ever feel like that? You're just tired of having to sort through what is true and what is not? So you rationalize and know that it can't be all true, so you tend to just think, well, it's all a lie. Who cares? Escapism is another thing that Toffler mentions. And don't you think we've reached the point of escapism? If it's not Netflix, then it's Prime Video. If it's not Prime Video, then it's doom scrolling till 2 in the morning. Toffler's idea, which is rooted, I think, in what Alan is getting at in his book, has become even more relevant in the 21st century with the explosive growth of digital technology, social media, innovation beyond our ability to have wisdom, and the globalization and cultural shifts happening simultaneously to our country. That's part of the reason why immigration is so dangerous. Not just because it overtaxes our material resources, not just because it overtaxes our finances, but it is overtaxing our way of life. There was a Christian ethic, a white, European, Western civilization that arguably was the greatest civilization on the face of this earth that built this country. Imperfect as it was, yet it gave us the country that we have. We are now being overrun with no ability to absorb and to hold on to what has made our country great. Now, Toffler, in a sense, like Alan, suggests ideas of slowing change, education, preparation, adaptability, flexibility, and stronger social support systems. And therein lies something that's very important. Stronger social support systems, I would argue, would be the church. But fundamentally, the problem is we must anchor ourselves on that which is unchanging. And what is unchanging? The only thing that is unchanging is the eternal Word of God. And it's not just enough to know the words of Christ, we must do the words of Christ. That is where the unchanging anchor of the soul, of the being, of the community comes from. Now, in summary, transhumanism is viewed as a seductive, one person writes, but ultimately false path, reinforcing the soul by attempting a soul trap, quote unquote, by attempting to replace or control the soul through technology. The end times is a period of intense spiritual challenge and transformation, where the choice is to awaken the soul's true nature or remain trapped in an artificial, mechanized existence. The choice in the end is not really if you can slow anything down. The choice is what you will be anchored to. More and more we see this dark world, these dark aeons, and the reality of future shock coming in on us. What do we do? What do we cling to? Only one hope, and that is we anchor ourselves in the unchanging Word of God. But here we are, AI, transhumanism, a new world order that is coming at us, not by tanks in the streets, not by being handcuffed and marched into train cars, but by being shackled with our mind, shackled in our decisions, shackled in our options, shackled in our way of thinking. It is not a physical captivity that is most dangerous, but it is a captivity of the soul. And that's what transhumanism is. It captures the soul, it captures the mind, and brings it into Promethean defiance.
Today we celebrate the first glorious anniversary of the information purification directives. Created for the first time in all history, a garden of pure ideology, where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests of very contradictory thoughts. Purification of the rules is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death and